All right, so today I want to do a short video for my friends who would like to explore how to use Blender and do some artwork maybe on Second Life for simple shapes and sculpture. So it's going to be a very short video. I'm just going to take you by the hand and walk you around. Whoops. And let's start that. So the moment of recording that video, I use Blender 3.1. It's probably not necessarily. You probably don't. I mean, you probably don't need to use the latest version. I mean, if you use a version from 2.8 and up, it's gonna work. What I'm gonna show you, but I highly recommend just take the last one. It's just better. All right. So when you start Blender, the first thing you see, of course, is the famous cube or the unfamous cube. Depends how you see that. And what I'm going to show you rapidly is how the interface is divided. So basically you have here your main view and you can go around the main object. You have here your menus and you can switch between different layers, which is basically kind of summarize everything you can do in Blender. And I tell you right off the bat, you're gonna not use any of those for Second Life. You just need very basic stuff. On the right side, you have here your scene collection. That's mean which object is present on the scene. So right now we have three objects. We have a camera, which you don't need for Second Life, your cube, which is your present mesh, and a light. So again, camera and light, it's something you will never use because it's for rendering. So if you want to do a kind of a movie or something like that, this is the kind of stuff you use. But for Second Life, you just want to do some modeling, sculpting, and export that to your viewer in Second Life, so you don't need that. And the last interesting part is here. This is other window. Is it covers like all the information related to the selected object, like the config, the active tool and things like that. But really, what you really want to check only is this little modifier properties. So you're gonna apply some modification to the object and also eventually to the material property, just to be sure you have one. So, but we're gonna focus mostly on this. So let's start by the obvious, how to move around the viewport, and I think this is the key because it's maybe sometimes unnatural, but you have to find, you have to make yourself really comfortable about moving around. So let's start with very basic stuff. So you can see here I have a display of which mouse button or key I'm pressing, so that's gonna help you to figure out. So the first thing, of course, if you have a 3 mouse button on the Windows platform, you press the middle mouse button and you can move around the selected object. So you know you select your object because it's orange. So if you just do that, so it helps you. And if you use again the middle mouse button, the scroll in, scroll out. So that's kind of a zoom in or zoom out. And if you press shift and middle mouse button, it helps you to move around, so like that. So it's kind of doing a pan. So basically the middle mouse button is your friend. So middle, just middle, it's going around, scrolling for zooming, zoom out, and shift middle mouse button is to do a pan. So you can also use the little gizmo here. I tend not to use that. I prefer the mouse is faster, but it's also another way. So you see I can move around like in my middle mouse button. Here, if I press left button mouse, you can zoom in, zoom out. And here, if I press this little hand, it's make you do the pan. So remember that. Scroll to zoom in, zoom out. Middle mouse, you press it. And shift, you do that. You can also press control and the middle mouse, and it's going to help you to do a kind of a different zooming for the object. So that's for the first things to learn is how to move around. So the other thing we're going to do is we're going to add a mesh, and we're just going to pick like this UV sphere here. So when I do that, you will notice now I have two objects. So if I press the key G, it makes the object move, okay? If I press now I have two objects in my scene, and that's really useful to start figure out things. You can see I'm moving around. So I'm just gonna remove the camera and press delete. I don't need this. I don't need the light either. So I'm just gonna stay focused on my two objects like that. So those two objects are completely independent from each other at this point. And that's something kind of tricky to figure out at the beginning with Blender is the state of an object. So an object is independent, so that means you can move the object independently. So when I select my sphere, I can grab it, G, so I move it around. So if I select my cube, I do grab and it's moving around. Press escape just to put it back in the center. And if I press another key like R for rotation, so I start having a rotation happening. And the rotation happening on the view. So that's mean if I looking this way, that's where the rotation happening. But if I looking that way, I press R, my rotation will happen like that. So this is not always easy to let's say you want to precisely move to one face, how you do that. So you try to put yourself. So there's different way to just center yourself. So you can just click the gizmo and, you know, if I press one of the face, I go to a specific face like that. That's kind of useful if you want to be precise. So for example, if I press R, I'm looking at the Y axis. So that's only this object will move like that. Okay. You can also use the keyboard. Like if you press one, and not the keyboard, the keypad, sorry. If I press one, it move like the negative Y. Press 7, it go on top. Press 3, go on left. So you just play with those notepad. It help you to just move around. So basically, it's important to be able just to face the object on the right axis if you want to do something precise. Okay, so now we have this. We have two objects. So now we're going to go a little bit further. It's the idea of object mode versus edit mode. And that's a very, very important concept. If you have something to understand today, that's this, because it's take me a while to figure out this. So basically, when you have an object like this or like that, and they are in object mode, you can modify the object and its entity. So like, for example, I can grab my sphere moving around, or can press S to scale it, you see? But maybe I want to modify just the vertices, and that's something you have to go in edit mode. So you see the little icons show like a little square with an edit. So if you click on that, your object will become a bit different. That means it's been now in edit mode. So you're working on that object specifically. So you don't touch this object, is really this one is being selected. So if I select, for example, this corner and I press G, I can move the vertices like that. By the way, vertices mean, or triangle, things like that. It is just kind of a lexic to explain you that you have different structures. So since it's a 3D object, there's basically three things you can play with. So, and you can see it right there. So here it's a point. So I can select one point like I did, or many point like that. Or if I press A, I select all the point and I do a scale like I'm in an object mode. But the idea here is just to select few of them. So if I go then here, I select this, it's become a edge. So I just move the edge of the object. And if I go here, I move the face of the object. Grab, so you see I move the face like that. So the important thing is now it's when you're in edit mode, you kind of a modeling mode. So this is a really kind of a important setup, saying you need to remember which object you have selected to know which one is in edit mode. So if you want to go and start working on this guy, what you have to do first is to get out of the edit mode and go back to object mode, and now select the object and go back to edit mode. And now you have the possibility to modify that object. You see, this is really a tricky thing to figure out. So now if I want to go back to this cube, I go back to object mode and then select the object I want to edit and go back to edit mode. So this is something really important. So there's other way to do that, but just remember, if you have multiple objects in your scene, they are independent mesh. And if you want to move from one to the other, you have to really do some switch between object and edit mode like that. Okay, so now we did that. So I'm just going to delete the sphere. And I'm going to show you kind of a basic things to modify the object. So when you're on object mode, you can modify the object as a global entity, and there's a very powerful tool here called the modifier, and that's the thing you're going to use a lot. So modifier, for example, they can do, one of modifier is to do a subdivision surface. So basically you see that it kind of split apart the object. So if I select like Catmull Clark, it's doing something like that. If I increase the resolution, so there's way more little cube or more surface, and if I keep it simple like that, so it is not obvious. But now if I apply that modification like this, and now I click on this to see a kind of a wireframe, I can see that it's many objects. So I go back to that guy, for example, and I go on edit mode now. You see there's many cube, many face now. So so my cube has been subdivided by the tool here. So why subdivision? But when more subdivision means also you can have more flexibility to modify your object. But you have to be careful, because if you have too many subdivision, your object will become way too complex, and Second Life have a limitation of that. So how do you figure out the limitation for Second Life? So the first thing you go is in your Blender, you go in Preference, you go in Interface, and then you go in Status Bar, and be sure you activate all those information. What does? It's the scene statistic, system memory, and everything. So it appears here, and it gives you kind of a highlight of the information. And the one you have to be really careful is that this one, it's TRIS, it's mean triangle. And Second Life have a limitation of triangle they use for a mesh. So the maximum number of triangle is 65,000. Never go there, because it's way too much and it's going to use a lot of prim on your sim. So try to stay under 10,000, but that's the limitation. So be careful. Whoops, when you do your editing, always look where you are with this triangle status. So now it's 3000. I think it's really reasonable. We can even have more than that. So let's go back on object mode and add more subdivision surface. And we're gonna add a little bit more like this. So now I can have a projection of the triangle. It's 49, so it's a little bit too much. So I'm just gonna go back one bit. So 12,000, it's good. I like this. So now if I go back on edit mode, I have a little bit more resolution. So this is kind of a reasonable, or I'll say max, to use for your work or your sculpture. So how do we sculpt? Or how do we modify? So we can, like, again, do a modifier, and we can use a very simple one. It's simple deform like this, and it start applying like a twist. You can twist your object like this, or you can bend it like that. So if you do a bend, so you can see it bends. And by the way, it kind of keep the current state, and that's kind of a projection of the modifier. So tapper or stretch. So I like the twist. So let's keep the twist like that. So just exaggerate a little bit, and then you apply it. So for applying, you go back on object mode like this, and I do apply. There we go. So now my object is being modified, and you can see it's completely twisted, and I can still do other stuff. One thing is nice to do before going to Second Life is just kind of applying a shade smooth. So if you right click, you do a shade smooth, and I kind of give a little more kind of nice look at it. So that's basically it. So last thing we have to do is UV editing. So UV editing, so basically remember, modeling, that's what we just do, is modifying the object. And UV editing, it looks like really advanced and really complex, but it's not. It's the way the object is unwrapped. So if I select the object and I press the key A for selecting all, I can see here kind of a 2D shape. So this is where the image or your texture is always a 2D image, will be applied on the object. So if you draw some stuff here, basically will never apply on the object. So if I click on this little UV sync here, and I kind of select that, you can see which part of the texture and where it's gonna be applied like that. So one thing I like to do is, now if I select this, you see my UV is not unwrapped properly. It's like it doesn't cover anything. So basically, if I try to have a texture for this part of the cube or this face, it will not work very nice. So one thing you can do is to unwrap this. So be sure you're on edit mode. You select all by pressing A, and then you go on UV like that, and you say I want a smart UV project. So it's gonna project your object. So it's just gonna resplit it properly and kind of giving more space for that. So if I click here now, I have more space for my texture. So of course there's many ways to do UV, so there's like a lot, but let's keep this in mind for now. So we're just gonna use smart UV, and now we have a good way of our texture being distributed on your cube. So that's it for Blender for now. So we just modify a little bit, we learn how to go around the viewport, and now we're gonna do the magic. So we're gonna export that to Second Life, and that's really simple. So we look at our number of triangle, we stay around 10,000, not too bad. I'm gonna remove, I just want to check be on object mode. So that's what our object should look like in Second Life. So if we go here, we're gonna do an export, and we're gonna pick collab data.dae. So that's the one needs to be used. So I'm just gonna use a little folder here. I'm gonna save this on the twisted cube like that. Export it. There we go. And now I'll go back to Second Life. So to import your mesh, you just go on Build, Upload, Mesh Model. And I'm just gonna pick my twisted. So again here, look at the size. Stay around 1000. Not go too high, because again, Second Life will limit your import, and it's going to be expensive to do. So I pick my twisted cube like this, and the first thing I notice is my cube appear. So that's a good sign. So my cube seems to be okay. And then the first thing you do is calculate weight and fees. And if I do that, my fees to upload is 30 linden, and the land impact is 27. It's a lot. So one trick to reduce that first is to play with the level of detail. So what is this level of detail? Is depending how far you are from the object, your viewer, like Firestorm in my case, will do some resolution with the triangle or not. So we see here that's our maximum triangle. So that means when we're really close to the object, that's what the engine will produce. But if we're very far, it will keep working on that. So, but it's expensive, because if you have many objects in a scene, they all have to be rendered. So that one way to cut the cost is just to say, I don't want to see my sculpture from too far. Just put it at 0. And and I click there, and I'm gonna recalculate the weight and fee. Be careful to reselect. So now you see, it drops to 11, which is the minimum price, and my land impact is 11, so it's even better. So I can even cut this a little bit, like maybe by half, will be like 700. And I do another calculation, weight and fee, and now it's even a little bit lower. So that's mean if I go a little bit further from the object, it's gonna start disappearing, but it's no big deal. I mean, if you're doing a sculpture that people were looking at really close, so just try to be efficient there. So, okay, now the only thing you have to do is upload, and there we go. Oh, I forgot to change the name there, so it's gonna appear as a cube. So I'm gonna rename this twisted cube, like that. And now you can drag it to your sim, and there we go. You got your cube in Second Life. And now what you're gonna do, of course, for now it's more like your creative aspect will kick in. So you can change the texture, like I'm gonna put some, I don't know, like object like that. So you can see my texture is being distributed. Will not say nicely, but enough to give you kind of a look at the shape, and I can, I don't know, put it full bright and stuff like that. So that's the workflow. Again here, just remember to go slow, learn how to move around your object, understand what's the difference between being in object mode and edit mode. That's the really key part. And you can play with modifier and different other tools. Like, take your time to explore everything, but at the beginning it's take time. Just learn how to go around, zoom in, zoom out, and do some. If you press tab, it's going to go in edit mode, for example. Just learn how to use the tools. For example, there's a powerful tools here, like this one. You do a grab, kind of do an organic modification like that. And always remember, when you're done with all your modification, go to your UV editing, select all UV and Smart UV project to give you kind of an update of your UV, so your texture will be properly being displayed. So I hope that helps you. And if you want to know more, just put some comment and maybe I will do another video one day. All right, take care. Bye-bye.